Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are doing the Steam Fall List Spring Clean Cleanup, inspired by the Steam Spring Cleaning event, where they asked you to play games in your backlog and see if there's anything that you haven't played yet that you might want to play. And of course, Steam is doing that because they want you to get into the mood of buying new games when the summer sale happens. Now, the way the recording has worked itself out, this is going to be footage that probably airs in December, so summer sale will have already happened then. If you want the exact details as far as what will determine whether a game that is now on my fall list, which is the middle list I use, there are games I see every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday when I look at new games that come out on Steam, games that I see that don't look good enough that I'd immediately put them on the wish list and put them in a category of I'm absolutely certain I want to buy it and cover it on my YouTube channel, but they're also not so bad that they should be just not saved anywhere. So these are middle ground games. And the vast majority of the games probably won't get elevated to the wish list. They will simply get demoted back to not being followed or not being wishlisted at all. We're mostly looking at games that came out at least 6 months ago. For instance, this game had a release date of July 25th, 2018. Or we're looking at games that have over 20 verified purchase reviews, which is what this number is. People who bought the game directly from Steam, they didn't have a key or buy it from a third-party site, or gifted the game for free or something like that, that are positive at least. So the way they categorize positive, mostly positive, and very positive is actually a very weird system in Steam that does not make sense. You can have something like this game where it is 81% of the reviews are rated positive. Reviews can either be positive or negative. You have to pick one. But then the game will be only labeled as positive because you only have 11 reviews. Whereas if there were 110 reviews, 10 times as many reviews, and 81% was positive, then the game would be labeled as very positive. And if there were about 1,100 positive reviews and 81% were positive, then it would be labeled as overwhelmingly positive. So it is actually a weird system, and those numbers might not exactly be right. It's weird how Steam does it, but a more popular, more reviewed game is considered more positive than something that has only 10 reviews and would be 100% positive. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's the right way to do it. Maybe it isn't. We'll be checking some other categories that might change my idea. And we'll try, as far as whether a game should go to the wish list or leave the fall list. But there's two categories here. Either the game needs to be relevant and it gains relevancy by other people playing it and rating it positively, or it has to have some kind of appeal personally to me, which would, generally speaking, be a very weird niche game. And I think that's the brief description of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going through games starting with the letter C. It's going to take a long time because this is the point where I really have to think about the games, whereas in several other times I may have just looked at the game for half a second and made a snap judgment. Now is not the time for snap judgments. This is their real effort. So we have this game called Camp W. It's tagged as a visual novel. Now, visual novels have a bit of a burden on them in the fact that if you come down here, you'll see this game does not have full audio. So as a YouTuber, if I was to play this game, I would probably be reading every single line of dialogue out loud, which hurts my throat, quite frankly. It burns out every YouTuber's throat quite a bit. What is also strange here, and this is a issue specifically with visual novels, is that by far Japanese games, this is clearly a Western game of some sort because it's only in English, but by far visual novels are made from Japan. Then you have a little Korean visual novels and some Chinese visual novels, and then Russian visual novels even. And then you have very, very few Western visual novels. That being said, Western coverage from mainstream video game people like The Verge, Rock Paper Shotgun's GameSpace will 100% ignore a Japanese visual novel, which probably is really, really good, but they will then bend over backwards to cover a Western one as if it was Western people's idea to make these type of games. So there's some kind of xenophobia is the only word to use it as far as coverage of visual novels, and that is something that if I am going to play a visual novel, I would want to work with. That being said, I cannot fix a problem by going in the opposite direction, and so if there is a good Western visual novel, which this seems to be a good Western visual novel, this deserves to be on the wish list. Camp W looks like it is an animation style that is similar to one of the Nickelodeon cartoons that I have seen commercials for briefly, but that's about it because it's been quite a few years, if not decades, since I last watched anything on Nickelodeon. That being said, I don't believe this is actually a direct copy of something that's on Nickelodeon, and I could be totally wrong about this. This might be based off a comic book or something else, but definitely I would say this animation style is a unique animation style regardless. And looking at the video, it seems like there's going to be a decent number of puzzles that pulls this away from being a 100% visual novel. It's $12.99, which is a high price for a game, certainly, but visual novels tend to be pretty expensive. So I don't really see anything here that I could find as far as a reason to not put this on the wish list. And if I was to look at the reviews and look for a negative one, there's not. This is more of an interactive book than a game. Yeah, that's what a visual novel is. Let's see. So people don't know what visual novels are, and they're reviewing it. I can't really take that seriously. Let's see what the Steam recommends similarly to this. Well, I don't recognize any of these games except for this, and this is an RPG Maker game I covered and hated. The writing was terrible on it, but I can't really use that against this game considering how terrible Steam's recommendation engine is. So Camp W looks like it's gotta go. So it's being moved to my wish list. That doesn't inherently mean it will be purchased, however, because still, when the summer sale happens, this would be a game I'd want to see at the $5 point. And this is kind of a niche game, so it may never actually go on sale, so there might be bigger AAA games, AA games, that are always a better offer. So it is very possible that games that are of a level of quality that I'm willing to watch will still sit on the wish list. And unless when I do in December, and I imagine I will in December do a wish list cleanup video, which would be very similar to this video, unless I found out that I've changed my standards and Camp W doesn't meet that standards, which would be unlikely. At that point, I might knock a game back down to the fall list or just remove it from the wish list completely. But I don't think we'll do that. My wish list has a lot of games on it. It is the curated list of games that I ask people to support my channel. If you want to gift a one-time gift, you can friend me on Steam and gift me any game off of my wish list, and then you know games that I want to cover. Then I get games that I can cover, and that makes it easier to run a YouTube channel, particularly a small YouTube channel like the one I'm running right now, or the one I have right now. Next game, and we will move through games faster now that we've done the setup, is a game called Campedo. I suppose it is also worth mentioning, in the last recording there was a game that had been completely removed from Steam. Turned out that game's name was Breach. It is listed on my follow list, but it has no store page. It has been completely removed. I'm sure there's a reason and a story behind that. In fact, I may have even heard the story or the reason behind why it's been removed from Steam, but I couldn't tell you now. So this game, Campedo, is a card game, and since I said every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I talk about new games that come out on Steam, also doing those live streams, I play Hearthstone. I'm always looking out for a new card game. This is not the kind of card game, though, that would play. I think this is an interesting art style because it is dogs playing poker in the art style of the cards, and a top-down perspective of dog characters that you're playing as. That being said, this fails to need to stay on the follow list because only 3 people have reviewed it, which is below my arbitrary number of 20 reviews. Generally, I want to see 20 reviews or at least 6 months old, and it didn't get 20 reviews. This is what I mean by a game that falls out of relevancy. Even if this was an amazing game, nobody's played it. My small-time YouTube channel is not going to highlight it and make it super popular. So there are very well possibilities that good games have just been overlooked. And with Steam Direct being a thing where anybody can publish any game, and with more and more big published AAA games coming out like crazy, particularly in 2018 and 2019, there's just been a ton of games that have come out. The field is getting flooded, and competition for people's attention is higher than ever. Campedo is $4.99. We could look at the reviews, but there kind of is nothing here that would save this game. What I would do if I was a boss of a company like THQ Nordic, there is several games that looked really interesting, and then well, this looks like the reviews won't load. Right now this is using up a significant amount of my RAM in my computer. I have over 16 gigabytes, and next time I build a computer I am going to probably jump it up to 64 gigabytes just because of the special instance of having hundreds upon hundreds of Chrome browser tabs open. Chrome in particular, when abused and overused, will use a lot of RAM. If I was the runner of THQ Nordic, though, I would buy a game like this and take that card art and just use that for something else. There's been several games that are interesting, to say the least, but then they didn't have enough polish on them to actually play well. There was a student project I just saw as of this recording yesterday for a game called Karma Flow, which is a rock opera game where they have big name rockers, rock musicians singing in the game, but the actual gameplay and mechanics of it is terrible, so it's not really recommended to play the game. It's better just to look up a YouTube playlist of all the rock opera sections and all the boss fights and just see the music. And then there's a game called Woofy, I believe, that was a dark interpretation of Little Red Riding Hood that was really highly anticipated, and then the company went out of business, and they left the game on episode 1 ending on a cliffhanger. So yeah, if I was a big AAA publisher, I would buy some of these old games and put some more effort into them and give them a second shot at life, which is generally what doesn't happen. You have companies buy games that sold pretty well and making remasters for them, or just re-releasing the ones that sold well instead of fixing the things that were bad, which has always been a thought around remasters. Why remaster the good games when they're often perfectly fine to still be played? Instead, remaster the old games. I'm getting off on a tangent, however, and that's not the intention here. So Car Mechanic Simulator 2018 here is rated very positively in the last 30 days, 81%. So here's a great example. The same 81%, and yet it's labeled very positive because there's 255 reviews, and it's mostly positive at 76%. The only reason this may have not been a option, and this would have been the question, is it is 2019 now. They put 2018 in the name. Did this developer, Red Dot Games, make a new car mechanic simulator series? Apparently not, because if they did, they would have highlighted it on their list. They've changed how these publishers make their publisher pages now, and if you click on the developer, you're not seeing what that specific developer made. Yeah, here's one from 2018, 2018, 2018, 2019. Apparently the only game they've made in 2019, assuming these are in chronological order, is a game called U-Boat. And seems like this publisher has a lot of games in development. 22 games upcoming. Of course, this is the publisher who's just funding other developers to make games. And in all fairness, a lot of these games don't look great. So it does look like Car Mechanic Simulator 2018 is the Car Mechanic Simulator game for the wishlist. I have never worked on it in cars at all, pathetically so, and I think doing some of this as a game, particularly if the game kind of teaches you what to do, would be very, very interesting. Now, I've seen this Diesel Brothers truck building game. It's not probably worth having, so I wouldn't suggest buying that combo. But this does look interesting. Now, I'm not saying at any point I would want to be a mechanic, but it wouldn't hurt anybody to learn some basics about how your car works. In all honesty, a lot of cars nowadays are designed with so little access to anything. Everything is crammed together that you often feel like you have to remove most of the entire engine to even change an oil filter, and they've made it complicated for no reason, just so you have to use mechanics. By the way, there's an implemented blur feature. If I move my mouse all the way to the left, that'll be for any games that are adult or lewd. We'll almost certainly run into some games like that. Let's move forward though. Next we have a game called Card Crawl, which is rated very positively. And of course, I would have probably seen this game when it first came out, and because of that, I wouldn't have seen any reviews. And so, trying to keep an eye on card games, even if they are only single-player card games. This is also a game that's only $2.99. English and German is not really a problem. If it was English and Russian or English and Chinese, I'd be a little bit more cautious on it. Not that those languages inherently mean that the game is going to be bad. And see, because of the RAM being used up, some of these screenshots aren't going to load. This looks polished enough. A solitary style of dungeon crawler played with a deck of cards. dungeon crawler games are often some of the worst games that are released. So you want to be a little bit cautious looking at dungeon crawler games. But I like to spin on this, and this feels like this probably wouldn't be more than a few hours of gameplay. Just play for all 9 of the achievements and be done with it. Let's see, we can see 31 hours, 66 hours, 3 hours, 16 hours. So it seems like there's a pretty good balance here of time. It's an endless grind to unlock even some of the basic cards. There's hardly any challenge, and the only challenge you can overcome are visual upgrades. So people that got into the game liked it. People that didn't like it, didn't like it. But Mob Rule says 82% of the reviewers did like it. So this is a game that would be a fine filler game to play. It is also the kind of game that I might just spotlight, in the sense that instead of doing an entire long play from beginning to end, which is what I usually do when I cover games, I might only spend 30 minutes or an hour talking about the basics of this game, and I would be perfectly happy to get that for, if I paid $2.99 for a game like that and only play it for 30 minutes, that's not a lot of expense. If I get it on sale for even less than that, that's a pretty good deal. Next, we're looking at a game called Cartoon Fall, which seems like it was a cardboard box stacking job simulator. Instead, it has become a physics-based Boom Blocks clone. Boom Blocks being the Wii Steven Spielberg game, I believe is the name of that. Steven Spielberg actually was involved in the development of several games. It's weird that they're going for a kind of a horror element in this too. Seems like it is kind of just all over the place. Well, this is 96% positive with 26 reviews. It's $7.99, which is probably not the price I'd want to pay. That really needs to be closer to $4, because there's a lot of question marks around this game. But we are running into a decent number of games that feel like they are in the category of good enough to play. Let's see. Let's see. A developer has responded to this negative review. This is a crazy negative review. View response. There's an option to turn off the dialogue so you don't have to listen to the voice actor. Is the response to allegations of the voice actor being caught with child pornography. That has nothing to do with the game, though. I mean, you have to separate the art from the artist, unfortunately, always. Seems like a lot of people like the sandbox mode. Seems like it's a lot of the languages that say they're in English and have been labeled as English are not in English as reviews. So there might be some review manipulation going on here. Something like this is a useless review. Fun little experience that's worth the money. Activated by a Steam key, so for all you know, the developer gave that Steam key to somebody to review it. English and Polish, so this seems to be a Polish game. Not a lot of Polish games come out. But without digging in and spending potentially 10-20 minutes reading every review and trying to get a better idea here. This looks like a physics-based Boombox clone, like I said. I'm looking for a game that's a physics-based Boombox clone, or Angry Birds clone is another way to call it. And so this does deserve to be on the wish list. Now what easily could happen here is I will find a better physics-based Angry Birds style of clone game, and that will mean Cartoon Fall no longer satisfies that need, or the need has been satisfied by something else, so I just take it off. Next we have Casino Mega Collection. The reason why this would have been on the fall list is I am actively trying to see a casino simulator game that is good, that does not have microtransactions or real world money in it, and with perhaps more controversies around loot boxes and microtransactions, we will eventually see a game like this. Although in all likelihood you would not find it on Steam, you would find it on mobile. If you want to play Wheel of Fortune Slots, I believe is the name of the game, you can play a no money slot machine game with the Wheel of Fortune license on top of it, which actually means you're getting a pretty good experience and they're not trying to make you buy microtransactions or things like that too much. But I'm looking for something that really has no in-app purchases. If the game did have in-app purchases, and it should have information like that. Here we can see that some of the features are limited because so few people bought this game. You can also see it's in the bundle, and that's an indicator that a game is not that good. So this game really was more of a case of a game that I had on my fall list to remind me, yes, I'm looking for something like this. It doesn't seem like I've found anyone that exists. This doesn't look terrible by any means, it's just not good enough, and it has no relevancy. So yeah, the search continues, and that will be removed from the fall list. Next we have Celeste, and at this point I've mentally tried to jump around the idea of not playing Celeste and not owning it, particularly because it is kind of a hardcore platformer, these rage jumper games where you're jumping around spikes. I call them Super Meat Boy clones because it was Super Meat Boy that really popularized that, and I did do a spotlight on Super Meat Boy to really just come to the realization that I can't play games like this. That being said, it's 96% positive in the last 30 days, 97% positive overall. I do have a little bit of arthritis in my fingers, so platformer games like this, or where you're smashing buttons a lot, often cause my fingers to hurt. That being said, I think maybe the triple jump, double jump abilities save you sometimes. Or, you know what, this is a game that still should be on my wish list, even if I personally am never going to buy it unless it was really, really cheap. This game also comes at a premium price of $20, whereas most games like this would be closer to $10. But it is such high quality, Celeste should be on my wish list. Maybe I'll get it for free in a Humble Bundle. Maybe somebody would gift it to me so I could just do a spotlight. That's an example of if I'm not having to invest my own personal money in a game, I can then own it, cover it, highlight it, say, hey, it's a great game, it's just not a game for me. Somebody has supported the industry here. Particularly if you're a fan of Celeste and you've bought the game for yourself already, and you still want to support them even more, buy the game and gift it to a friend. That's a pretty good way to go. Let's see. Next we have Cells to Singularity Evolution Never Ends, which seems to be a strategy game, free-to-play simulation game. It's in early access. It came out December 12th in 2018. So for this game, which I think is probably way too ambitious for what it's doing, because it seems like it's trying to depict all of evolution in one game, in a strategy game. Which there was a game called Spore that tried to do a similar thing, and I think most people only got to the first part of the game and never saw the later acts in Spore because it was so long and kind of difficult. A lot of this looks like it at a point becomes a clicker game also. The problem here is this is early access, and again, no in-app purchases labeled, so I don't know how this developer is ever going to get any money making your game free to play unless it has ads in it. And I've never really seen a game on Steam that has ads on it. That's just something that's never happened. Apparently this game is collecting personal data, according to this review. Let's see. Seems like it gets boring, according to another negative review. I don't think we need to go any further, though. This needs to just be removed. It's been in early access. It's been given 6 months to come out of early access. I don't see why games deserve more than 6 months to be in early access, because basically what that means is you never had a plan, you never had a schedule you could stick to. I guess in part AAA games releasing as early access have changed in my mind what early access means to make it feel like it's more of a beta, but quite frankly, I wouldn't give 6 months to anything else either. If you haven't figured out how to stop adding features and or just get your features and your bugs fixed in 6 months, you probably won't get it done ever. Next we have a game here called Changeling. This is tagged as an otome, as in maiden game, young maiden game, which this is a very Western animation style, and otome is really referencing Japanese visual novels more than anything. It says it's a simulation and a fantasy game, but to me it looks like it is a visual novel. I'm not sure I really like this art style, quite frankly. It's 97% positive. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't like this art style that much. It's not tagged with any real sexual content, and while this is nudity, it's not tagged with nudity, so male nudity is not the nudity that anybody is concerned about on Steam, apparently. $19.99 is a little expensive for a visual novel. English, again, with no full audio. This is the type of game that I would want to highlight as a Western visual novel. But then you also have to see that it has 35 to 40 hours of playable content, because there's several routes. That's 4 to 6 hours per route. This apparently is calculated at a reading speed of 300 words per minute, which I don't know if that's a fair calculation or not. I don't know what an average person's reading per minute would be, but if I'm, as a YouTuber, having to read it out loud, I bet it's lower than that. Seems like it's mostly recommended reviews. This game, though, I think I have to put it in the category of I'm gonna highlight it here and say if Changeling looks interesting to you, by all means go out there and get it. It seems like it's a fine game. I just don't like this art style. I have yet to really find a consistent Western animation style, something that doesn't look like just anime characters. This isn't terrible, but it often looks like it is drawn with colored pencils, and it is lacking in shading or tone or something. I've yet to find a Western art style that seems good or consistent. And when you look at Western animated shows on TV, you've got like Family Guy and Rick and Morty and things like that, and there's no consistency in that art style either. So we really don't, in the West, have a good tradition of art for a while. I would assume if we went back to like classic romanticism art styles, something that was hyper realistic, if you could draw that would be good. As for Changeling, no, I'm gonna just reject it. Quite frankly, rejecting a few visual novels is going to be great, but I am certainly going to show my bias here, because the next game we have is Chaos Child, which is a Japanese visual novel, and being a fan of anime for quite a long time in life, the bright colors, the big eyes, the weird angles that are not in any way representative of a actual human being's body is a thing that has, I think the bright colors more than anything are what I like about the anime art style. So this is from Spike Chunsoft, a well-known developer. It's from the creator of Steins Gate, a critically acclaimed anime that's pretty popular right now. This is I would say Japanese games in general tend to go with a darker, more extreme storyline, so there's gore and violence in it, whereas the previous game was probably mostly just romance, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's romance in this also. Mystery. Korean movies in particular sometimes do it even better than anime does, where you'll have a Korean comedy movie that is half comedy, half horror, half mystery, half detective story. It's just like everything and anything is mixed together, and you get a lot of variety there. So this is part of a bundle of Steins Gate, the game, and Steins Gate Zero, the game, for $90, and they're asking for a lot of money here, certainly $35, but this very well may be a top tier visual novel. And if I was going to cover visual novels, this and something like Clannad, the Steins Gate bundle and something like Clannad, might be the only games that I need to cover or should cover. And then you'll often run into games that aren't quite visual novels but have a lot of talking. Persona is probably a good example of that. You have full Japanese audio, which helps a little, not a lot, because it would still be, if I would want to hear the full Japanese audio, but then I probably would still need to read out loud. Maybe I could find some way to let the Japanese speak out loud and just let people read off the screen. Of course, a lot of people on YouTube are watching videos on their cell phones, so reading text at the bottom of a screen, depending on how big you get that text, if you have a small cell phone screen, you may not be able to read that, which is also a concern. As things stand, though, there's really no way to justify removing this. You have 99% over the lifetime of 234 user reviews, verified purchase user reviews, saying this is positive. You have 100% of the 18 user reviews in the last 30 days saying this is positive. You literally cannot get better reviews than that. And if there were more reviews, this would be labeled as overwhelmingly positive, not very positive. So just in its niche, and let's not forget that visual novels are a niche, very small cult culture. This is one of the best, though, and deserving of that price. But you have to be careful, because you'll see some bad games also trying to sell at that price. So there's no way getting around that. Chaos Child should be on the wish list. And the previous visual novel is not making it to the wish list, so we're balancing it out and reducing the number of potential visual novels I'd want to cover. And I'm not 100% sure I want to cover any of them. That doesn't mean I don't want to own them. There are games that I want to support industry-wide that I want to own and won't want to play. There's plenty of very old games that don't run right that I own that are still available on Steam. Particularly like the first Lara Croft Tomb Raider games don't really run right. The first Hitman games don't really run right, but you might as well. You're still supporting the industry and the companies that actually still develop games when you purchase those things. And maybe at some point in the future there will be an emulator that comes out that will make those run better, or some kind of mod that will make games like that run better. Next we have a game called Chessboard Kingdoms, which is an interesting looking concept. I'm always looking for a good chess game, something that would be on the level or better than playing chess on chess.com, where there's like a mobile app for that and you can play your friends. And for Steam, there are quite a few chess games, but they all seem to have a caveat, and in this case, this isn't really chess. This is instead chess pieces that move like chess pieces on a different shaped and sized board with different elements, which takes something familiar and takes it into a new direction. The problem here I see is it came out in November 16th of 2018. It's still in early access. It has 0 paid reviews. It's selling for $4.99. It's English, Russian, and Chinese, and a troll game or a low effort game that supports Russian or Chinese is pretty common. Like, there's a lot of bad game developers out of Russia, or that support the Russian language for some reason. There's a lot of bad game developers, low effort game developers that support simplified Chinese or traditional Chinese, and then on top of English. It is also, I guess, worth mentioning that if games come out on Steam and they don't support English, they don't make it to the fall list at all. So I am biasing and removing anything that is not in English. This is probably going to load forever, but there's no user reviews anyways, so the decision is pretty easy here, even though this does look pretty interesting. The only thing that might save this developer is if they had some other game that they had made, and then they might have some credibility, but they don't. So for all we know, and this is the problem, is this could have been just an animated movie. None of this could be done in an actual game engine, and everything we're seeing here might just be like a trailer that's not actually depicting the final product at all, for all we know. But we don't even have to go that far, because things we do know is we know the release date is not so easily manipulatable. You can remove games from Steam and then relaunch them on Steam, but Valve does seem to keep a small eye on that. Some people have found ways to change the release date over and over again, so they can manipulate the highly anticipated upcoming games list, and Valve has been complained about for allowing that to happen. But we know this is early access. We know it's been 6 months. This game needs to leave the follow list. We followed it quite literally, as it says in the name. We followed this game. We saw where it went in 6 months, and where it went was exactly nowhere. It hasn't gotten any sales. It hasn't gotten out of early access. Or it probably has gotten sales, but it hasn't gotten any reviews. Next we have a game here called Chief's Quest, which looks like a simplistic platformer game. These are a dime a dozen on Steam. And what I assume caught my eye about this visually is it's a depiction of a Native American playing in the game, which would be an interesting story, certainly. The problem I guess you could run here is that any kind of decision you make would potentially be an offensive decision. Even the logo here might be claimed to be offensive to Native Americans, by Native Americans, or by just pearl clutching social justice warriors out there, and that's probably why we haven't done that. I would also say that a lot of games are made out of Asia and Japan, so Japan does not know anything about Native Americans to tell a story like that. They have no real interest or fascination with that, as far as I've ever seen. So taking that out, what would be interesting if Great Chief Studio actually was a studio of Native American programmers. That would be kind of cool. But taking that out of consideration, though, this interesting art aesthetic, it is just a simplistic platformer game, and I really have no need to play a simplistic platforming game. It falls into the same category again, where it's been over 6 months and it's still in early access. Apparently in February it sold 50 copies. Apparently in March it has a second level added, so there's only one level. 6 achievements. It kind of makes it an achievement game. They're name dropping some big titles here as far as anime movies. Chief's Quest is a classic action platformer inspired by Native American culture, as well as anime movies such as Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, both Miyazaki classics that are highly well known. Like, that's not terrible inspirations, it's just you've not really made a game here, unfortunately. And this is a problem with Steam Direct in general, is that there's no filter here from somebody who thinks they can. They think they can make a game, and in 6 months they've not been able to make but a second level. I would have assumed for the price tag of $5 as a simplistic platformer, which almost certainly is being programmed in a very bad engine. I doubt this is just being programmed in Unity by somebody who knows how to program in Unity. It's probably being programmed in some kind of RPG Maker-esque style of middleware that makes it way too easy to program a game, and it makes it seem like anybody can make a game. Even if that's true, though, level design ability is totally missing here. Like, just ridiculously missing. And I would mention Cuphead as a comparison. Like, Cuphead was made by just a few people, I believe, and it was kickstarted, and it was going to be just a boss rush battle game, all hand drawn, and they had at least a dozen bosses when it was first announced and released, and then people asked them to make platforming jumping levels, and they added a significant amount of platforming jumping levels to it, which made the game a little bit longer and probably a little bit better. So when you look at the great success of Cuphead, and then you look at Chief's Quest, they've gotten nowhere. So yes, this needs to leave the follow list. Next we have Chroma Shift, a cooperative side-scrolling puzzle game. Is it single playable? It says it's single player. Every part of the game is designed with 2 players in mind, so I never really have anybody that could play and record videos with me consistently. It's frankly asking too much of one person to try to run a YouTube channel, let alone 2. So this game is kind of out because of that. You see it's 66% positive of 15 user reviews. This looks like a much more polished platformer compared to Chief's Quest. Of course, they are going for a different art style, and in all fairness, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this is pre-purchased assets. But there's nothing wrong with pre-purchasing assets and using them if you're using them to make an actual game that has an interesting gameplay mechanic. Let's see what the negative reviews have to say. The game looks nice and interesting. There are too many bugs that make the game unplayable. 4.5 out of 10. Let's see. Nice idea, but the game is bugged to be recommended. While the puzzles are okay, the game is ultimately just boring. So we got several complaints of the game being buggy, which is believable. $11.99 is a little expensive too for a no-name developer studio that's self-publishing, called Dev or Die, which is a kind of interesting name, but actually with so much talk about game developers being forced to work themselves to death via crunch, calling your studio Dev or Die Studio is probably not the best idea either. So Chroma Shift, another game leaving the follow list, and at this point you probably have realized that the vast majority of these games are getting removed. These were towing the line as potential games, and now that there's a little bit more information, they did not live up to the benefit of the doubt or the potential I gave them. Whereas when I was doing the wishlist cleanup previously in December of 2018, I was very, very generous with games and saying, okay, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and maybe move it to the follow list or just leave it on the wish list. That's stopped at this point. Now my standards have increased. So here we have a game called Citadel, the Ancestral Strain, which looks very much like a Castlevania game or a Castlevania clone, if not a complete copy of a Castlevania game. It's from Plug-in Digital as a publisher, one I've kind of recognized. It's tagged as a Metroidvania. A lot of this art looks like it might be directly copied / stolen from Castlevania, or just a lot of heavy inspiration. Probably too much inspiration to the point of possible copyright infringement. There's another game called Cathedral: The Legends Trilogy that came out in 2017. This came out in 2018. Neither one of these games have gotten enough reviews to get a review. Apparently you get the cell phone version for free. That's nice. I'd like to see that as a feature that gets added a lot. And quite frankly, Steam could do very well to be a secondary game store to Google Play or the Amazon store. And just if you buy a game that happens to have a cell phone version, it launches and installs them. Let's see. let's see if we can see any of the reviews. Let's see. First off, it's not a Metroidvania. It's a level-based platformer that has some exploration aspects in some of the levels. Of the 4 levels, 2 I played, 2 were linear and 2 had some exploration. Some of the old Castlevania games actually aren't Metroidvania games, and I think that's probably what happened here. And I probably would agree with it. It probably isn't actually a Metroidvania game. This game is very heavily inspired by Castlevania. That's what I saw too. So the one English review says not recommended. It's $8. It came out in October. I guess I would want to play this game first. And this game looks differently animated, at least for this thumbnail. And this also only has 4 reviews. Now, this is the problem as it is right now, is that there aren't actually good Castlevania games or the old Castlevania games on Steam. And so Citadel is filling a niche and a desire, or trying to fill a niche and desire. Clearly, not only 4 people bought it and reviewed it, but this is the type of game that has really no business existing on Steam, except for the fact that the old Castlevania games are not on Steam. Or at least they weren't. I think if we type in Castlevania, since this game has come out, the Anniversary Collection, which does have a lot of the old pre-Metroidvania style Castlevania games, are now available on Steam. So this now has no relevancy at all, because the niche and the hole they were filling, that nobody was really even interested in seeing filled, obviously, has been filled by the originals. And quite frankly, if you want to play the old Castlevania games, that's probably just as fine to go find a ROM of it instead of giving money to Capcom, because Capcom really isn't making any new Castlevania games as far as I can tell. So that's another game that's leaving. Next on the list was the predecessor, and we don't really have to jump through mental loops here, or mental hoops. The same things I just said totally apply to this game as it do the previous game. It's kind of a shame that it wasn't a better, longer game. I think also you would guess that this is the type of game that would have needed some mainstream coverage to get in front of the eyes of people, because it looks old and it looks simplistic, and it is old animation styles and simplistic gameplay. You would need somebody who is either well known as a fan of Castlevania to come out and say this actually is a good clone of Castlevania, or this is actually a good game for some other reason. And since that didn't happen, we're talking now nearly a year and a half since this game came out, and it only has 4 user reviews. And those same 4 user reviews might just be friends of the people that made the game. And that just happens. Like, as more and more games are getting released, games just get missed and they don't have relevancy. So, which brings us to Claws of Fury. This has 6 user reviews as a beat 'em up game that came out in September 4th of 2018. It doesn't look terrible at all as a game, but they want $10 for it. It is playable in single player, which would be part of my concern. It's rated E 10 plus up, although some games get this rating for other things, or they just claim they have the rating when they really don't. I have no idea why this is a negative review. but let's see, review types 5. The rest are not in my language. A Russian negative review, Russian negative review, Russian negative review. Now, one of the things here is a Russian negative review might be the person who made the game buying reviews, because what they'll sometimes do when you buy reviews is they'll put negative reviews and positive reviews, and you can see only 6 people actually bought this game through Steam, whereas this is activated by a key, this is activated by a key, this is activated by a key, this is a Steam purchase, this is a Steam purchase. So what I suspect happened here is this developer tried to cheat and they got punished for it. This is baseless speculation with no evidence, but I think that's what happened. They had what looks like a decent game. In all fairness, this looks like a fine, funny cat game, although there are some other cat games out there that are probably way more relevant and way more interesting. It seems like it's also a game that's focused on playing with 4 players or at least 2 players, and that becomes a slight problem on Steam too. I don't feel like PC players in particular play side-by-side couch co-op games that often. They're more often playing online with their friends, and this is local multiplayer and online multiplayer, so I guess you could do both. Yeah, this game looks fine, but it's leaving because it has no relevancy, and for the slight thought that it very possibly tried to cheat in reviews. But if Steam caught them cheating on reviews, they should have removed the game in total and stopped doing any business with them, because that really is Steam's only recourse to somebody cheating their review system. And that's really Steam's only recourse to anything, is to say, we are just not going to do business with you ever again. There is no strike system like YouTube or anything like that. So I doubt that there is some kind of algorithm on Steam that is suggesting or not suggesting that game because of the reviews. I imagine it is more just a case of it's not getting suggested because nobody played it. Next we have a game called Clocker, which is rated very positively. What's funny about this game is I feel no familiarity with this game at all. Like, most of the games we've seen, once I see them, I go, oh yeah, I saw that 6 months ago. There's a little bit of recognition there. Not a lot. I see thousands and thousands of games over the course of a year. But this feels like it is brand new, and it clearly can't be. I clearly saw it at some point, because I wouldn't have been able to put it on the follow list otherwise. Nobody else has access to put things on my follow list. Let's see. Seems like it's a puzzle. They're saying it's an RPG game. I would say it's probably closer to a point-and-click adventure, if I was to guess. Let's see. Yeah, this seems like it's more of an adventure game where you have some kind of time rewinding ability. It's 90% positive of 50 user reviews, so it passes that goal. It's $11.99. Quite frankly, almost every game is a little too expensive for my tastes in its original version. This is a game that was Steam greenlit, so it was out for a while, or in development for a while. But yeah, I don't think anything could convince me not to put this on the wish list. And playing a game like this would be weird because of its strange mechanics. but it would also be good because it's probably pretty short. Never heard of this developer. I've never heard of this publisher. Let's see. It's English and then a second language, and they can choose what languages are going with order or simplified Chinese. So I'm suspecting that this might be a Chinese game that's been translated to English, but it looks like a good Chinese game, and I'd love to highlight good Chinese games. Then they also, often it'll say it supports Spanish, but I think what they mean is Spanish in general, and then Russian, which is an odd combination. But yeah, there's no way Clocker doesn't deserve to be on the wish list. I imagine this is also a short game, so it would be a nice little filler game. I generally would like to play more games that are short instead of playing something that will take 100 hours to play. Next, we have a game called Cloud Chasers: A Journey of Hope, and unfortunately I think this one has to be removed unless I'm going to make an exception to this game just because of its visual appeal. See, looking here, there's a strategy game that you play, and you choose the events in a choose your own adventure text thing, so there's a lot of text also happening here. I think that's probably the problem. The animation here is kind of deceptive in what the actual game is, and I don't know if this flying sequence is really a gameplay mechanic that gets used a lot or what. Seems like a lot of the game is played like this, from a top-down perspective, and then there's movements and card-based gameplay, and maybe this is a flight section. Seems like it's all over the place, but what the game definitely does not seem like is this animation. It does not seem like you really see this. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game developed by an animation studio, and so they made it an interesting animation sequence and decided to sell it as a video game instead of it. And there's a whole bunch of games here under other names for $36. That's strange to have 7 games under $40. And there's 45 achievements, which makes it feel like an achievement game. And then there's a bunch of awards here, but that doesn't really mean much because awards are, quite frankly, a dime a dozen. Let's see. Cloud Chasers: Journey of a Hope is a neat idea. It contains some very clever parts. Unfortunately, the process of putting them together is something has come unstuck, and the entire experience isn't being delivered. There's still a lot to engage with, but it will take players a bit of fortitude to stick it out till the end. See if there's any other negative reviews we could see. No, there's only one negative review of 5 positive reviews. So the worst part about this is not the negative review, it's just that nobody played it. Came out in October of 2018, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of game developers simply release their games at the wrong time. Even October is probably a little too late for games. E3 has happened by the time October is rolled around. People are thinking about the new games, the next gen consoles, the things that they're going to buy on Black Friday, which are going to be AAA games. Small indie games probably would be best coming out 1, 2, 3 months before E3 happens, when things are drying out, or after the Christmas holiday, January, February, March, those months are usually very dead as far as game releases, so there'd be less competition. But a lot of holidays not relating to video games also happen in the winter when you've got Halloween, you've got United States Thanksgiving, you've got Christmas, you've got Hanukkah, you've got all these holidays that take up people's time and attention. So putting out a small indie game is not going to be a smart move at that point. So for its lack of relevancy, even though I do like the art style in the initial cutscene, which is true for a lot of games, this is one I have to pass. And see, they call this a migration journey, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is trying to lean on some political story, which might explain a lot of these awards. And so there might be controversy built into playing a game like this that I'm not even looking to cause. So another great reason why this is going to leave the fall list. Mostly that text is pretty bad too. Next game we have is called Clouded, which seems to be a game where you have 5 minutes of memory. So it's like the game, what is it's like the movie Memento, where there is a person who has only a certain amount of memory, short-term memory, and then they forget everything, which I don't think so accurately and specifically and precisely would ever actually happen. So you write on your hand, and you're with a Sharpie, which actually if you were writing on a Sharpie, then you would not be able to erase it in any way. This is an interesting idea, but I would have to put this on the wish list as a unique gimmick game. It has 4 user reviews. It's $2.99. This is really a short indie game, I'm almost certain. And yeah, people don't play it. Let's see. So here's our first not recommended. I found the game browsing through the all upcoming games tab, which is basically how I found it, which is a bit hard to find nowadays, blah blah blah. I wasn't sure if the game was going to be any good, but I stuck with it on my wish list because I was trying something new, blah blah blah. Yeah, so I thought that's an interesting enough premise. A couple of days after it came out, I checked out the reviews and saw it had 0 reviews, blah blah blah. But I can't really do that after playing the game for half an hour. The conclusion is I've come to it's not ready to be a commercial product. I mean, art is art and this is art, but this feels more like portfolio work. For starters, there's no starting screen, no menu, no options, no way to quit the game without alt-tabbing and closing the game manually. It's also very short. Blah blah blah. This is a extremely long review, but yeah, we've got it. This is another one of those ideas of a game that, yeah, why not copy this idea? You're already stealing the idea from Memento, and you could get away with having a character that has extreme Alzheimer's or a head wound and brain damage some other way, so that they would forget things. And so I don't think you'd get sued for copyright infringement by the creator of Memento, and I don't think the developer of this game could sue you for any kind of copyright infringement unless you just try to copy it directly. But this concept feels like it would work. That being said, I guess there was a game called Remember Me that played pretty badly that does have this concept, but that was a long time ago. That was nearly 10 years ago that Remember Me came out. I've covered that on my YouTube channel if you want to watch that. But yeah, they could have certainly done something like that in Crackdown 3. It would have fixed a lot of problems, quite frankly, if the characters from Crackdown 1 and 2 that you played as had their memory erased. But I don't think that happens. Next, we have a game called Coffee Ints, like a it's coffee and conference combined. By the way, that previous game is also being removed from the fault list in case I didn't make that clear enough. This looks like a player versus player fighting game where people are drinking coffee, which is kind of a funny game, and apparently it came out on the Switch. Unfortunately, at this point, so many games that really don't deserve to be on a console have been allowed on the Switch eShop that there's no longer any prestige for a game coming out on the Nintendo Switch. It is kind of the exact opposite of the Nintendo seal of approval that was in the 80s with the NES. Now almost anything is allowed. They do have certain standards, but a short, simplistic, and not really worth it game can totally be on the Nintendo eShop and they don't care. This fighting game, because of the numbers here, is probably an indicator of lives. So you probably only have 10, maybe 7 lives or hits that you can take. $14.99 is pretty expensive. Let's see. Here we have somebody who got it for free that's rating it negatively. Paying $14 for 6 playable characters with the same movement, a single player experience that can be completed in 30 minutes, awful optimization, barren online community, not worth it. I don't think I have to go any further. This one says the online is 100% broken. But yeah. Making a fighting game is a hard thing to do. It's probably one of the most difficult styles of games to make. And the animation here is interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if a game like Street Fighter did have a character who was drinking coffee as he's fighting and using that as his fighting style. But having all of your characters do it is kind of repetitive. It feels like this is a attack on hipsters in particular, which as a joke is fine by me, but it is kind of silly. So this really feels like a game that was either a Game Jam game or a game that it was an inside joke that they took so far or felt that they could make some money on it. And it gets into a much deeper conversation about who deserves to sell what products on Steam. Is it going to be a curated experience, or is it going to be a libertarian open market experience where anybody can sell anything? This really, to me, feels like a game that should not be allowed to be at this price, should not be on a major storefront, the number one storefront of PC games. That being said, it doesn't really matter. It's been out for 6 months. Only 10 people have reviewed it. And at this price, I suspect it probably hasn't gotten very many sales. It'd be funny if I could find something else that was somewhat close to this idea, but the recommendations are things like Nidhogg, which was very positive with 4,000 reviews, player versus player fighting game with swords, or Lethal League, which is also a big time fighting game, Dive Kick, which is also a better known joke fighting game. So in the same category, there's at least 3 games I recognize here that have better reasons to exist. And I personally don't think I need to do a series of joke fighting games. If I'm going to cover fighting games, there's plenty of legitimate fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and, well, dozens other that I'm still trying to get an order or get a list in my head of which games are actually worth playing and which games aren't. So confusing the issue with parody games is not going to help anything. So that's leaving the fall list. Next we have a game called Color Chain. This is a simplistic puzzle game that I was obviously, I remember when I put this on the fall list, I was trying to give it a chance to see if it would potentially turn into something or get enough reviews that it might be justifiable to play. It is asking only 99 cents, and I've seen games as cheap as, I believe, well, 69 cents for sure, maybe even 49 cents for a game, so it's not asking a lot. Although at 99 cents it may not ever go down in price either, and it may still not be worth 99 cents. I kind of hate this 70s mod style palette. Like, some of these colors look really, really bad. And then that looks unreadable. I can't read any of the yellow here on the screen. So we could scroll down and see the one negative review. Great soundtrack, can't say the same for the game. That was something that was happening for games a long time too, where a game would have a really good soundtrack because they either knew a musician or had good taste in music or made the music themselves, and then they put a bad game around that great soundtrack. Nothing really more to say. This isn't going to the wish list. Next we have Color Party, and in the same vein, everything I just said can be repeated for this. This was a puzzle game. It's slightly different as far as how the puzzle plays. You have to have some element of each head touching some other element of each head, is I think how this worked. It's 59 cents discounted right now. It has 2 reviews, came out in July. We don't need to go any further. 95 Steam achievements means it's an achievement game, and so achievement games are generally avoided because they are just trying to make you purchase a very low effort, bad quality game to get achievements. There's no reason even to get achievements on Steam, because the only thing Steam does is it will highlight on your profile the number of achievements you've gotten and the number of games you've gotten, 100% of that game's achievements in general. So it's not like it's a real metric of being good at games by any mean. I would imagine there are thousands of really, really good gamers that have only played Counter-Strike Go on Steam and have very few achievements. So this game, Combat Rush, is kind of like Snake. You're controlling the head of this long line of military people, and as you pick up more military people, they are added to the line and they have different gun firing abilities. So you're playing Snake, but there are enemies that might be shooting at you or enemies that you need to shoot at, such as this tank. There is a mobile version of this game. In fact, there's probably several games at this point in this similar concept. But I've yet to see a Steam version of it. There's a lot of styles of games and types of games that exist only on mobile that could easily come over to Steam. I would also say this game is probably not that interesting to play after the first couple hours, because you are just effectively playing Snake with enemies, which is an evolution of the concept of Snake, sure, but not that much. And having only 6 reviews and coming out on August 14th of 2018, being available for purchase at 99 cents, it's not asking a lot, and still people haven't been willing to buy it as a game. And you can see all the reviews that are being shown are positive. Like there's not a single negative review according to this at all. Everybody likes this game. So do I put this on the wish list because it's a hidden gem and it's cheap? Or do I ignore it because it's a mobile port and nobody cares about it and it has no relevancy? This is actually a more difficult decision than it might seem, because we've been going through so many games and just going, yeah, there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's an indication on how many levels this has. There's 12 types of mercenaries that you have follow you. There's an arcade arena mode. You upgrade your units so it has an RPG element to it. Well, so far I've been very good. I've been able to make a decision. Maybe it's because we've been streaming for over an hour, nearly an hour and a half now, that my mental energy has been depleted. But I think this game in particular, I want to give another 6 months to. Probably nothing will happen. In 6 months, it still probably will only have 5 user reviews. But yeah, I think I'm going to give this another 6 months to see if somebody will pick it up and people will review it. It's not asking a lot, but it also might just be a mobile port. And quite frankly, if I find a game that is the same concept, which is pretty well known as far as mobile games, and looks better or sells better, then I could easily remove it from the follow list at that point. But I have yet to do that. So next we have a game that's tagged sexual content and gore, so let me just go into blurry mode for a moment to see if any of the screenshots show anything that is family unfriendly. No, I think we're cool, so we'll come out of blurry mode. So this visual novel adventure game, it's more of an adventure game than a visual novel in my understanding. It's part of a series that has been popular and then was brought out to Steam relatively recently. So the Corpse Party series has come to Steam. I don't know really why this isn't just on the wish list in the first place. It's basically, I think a ghost is forcing a bunch of anime kids to follow a script, and otherwise they get murdered, or they get murdered in the scripts, either way. So this is the midquel to Corpse Party and Corpse Party Book of Shadows. So there's a whole trilogy of these. It's asking $19.99. For the people who have played it, it's 95% positive. This came out April 10th, 2019, so it has not been 6 months. This is just past the 20 review positive review element that it needed. So apparently the game has been out for 7 years and it's coming to Steam. This is part of a so this is going to the wish list. Although, in all fairness, this might be one of those games that I own and can't cover on Steam, and because I can't cover it on Steam, I may never actually get around to playing it. But yeah, we've started to see a pattern of games that were PlayStation exclusives or Japan only releases that have started coming to Steam and PC. Particularly, a lot of that has to do with how PlayStation, as in Sony Interactive Entertainment, which is a subsidiary of Sony, the big Sony company that sells TVs and such, they moved their head office to California out of Japan, and then they started implementing censorship regulations, making it harder for the game developers to continue to make the games they had always been making before. So what once was a very tight relationship between Japanese game developers and PlayStation, to the point where almost all Japanese games were PlayStation exclusives, now have become more of a case of the game will get released on the PlayStation, but it'll also get released on the Japanese Nintendo console, which would be the Switch, and it'll also get released to PC. I don't particularly believe that this is because Japanese people are adapting playing PC gaming as much or more. There still is a major factor of PCs being a little too big for a small Japanese apartment, so I don't 100% believe that. If anything, I would say Japanese players are moving to more mobile gaming, which that would make a lot more sense. So the benefit, though, is people who like Japanese games, who speak English around the world and around the Western Hemisphere, are now benefiting from playing games that we've heard about but could only play either by fan translation or if you could read Japanese and import the game. Moving on, we have this game called Crayola Scoot, which I actually thought that this was going to be somewhat of a successful game. It came out in October of 2018. It has the Crayola Crayon license. It basically is a PC equivalent to Splatoon. I think it loses probably some of its coolness factor. Is there no video? That's a problem. There's like no video here at all. I think it loses some of its coolness factor in the fact that you're using scooters with handlebars instead of skates or skateboards or anything else. That was a bad decision. Rollerblades would have been smarter, or skateboards would have been smarter. I would go with skateboards because it's having the grinding elements of a skateboard. So, and like Splatoon, as you're grinding on things and rolling on things, you are leaving your team's color behind, I think is the general idea. It's $19.99, and unfortunately it just doesn't have any relevancy. Kind of exactly what I would say is the opposite of my whole conversation about more games from Japan coming to PC. Really, no more games, or never has there been a case where kids games have come to Steam in great numbers. There's not a lot of kids games in general, and almost all of them are on the Nintendo console, the Switch or the Wii U or the Wii. So it's incredibly hard to be a PC gamer as a parent and say to your children, I imagine this is so, play games on the PC. From what I've heard, most gaming parents play games on the PC and then hand a Switch to their kids, which works pretty well as an idea too. But yeah, unless you're big into having your kids play emulated old games, trying to play kids games on Steam is very difficult. Even the Lego games, which I've covered quite a bit, don't run well on my PC with my current setup. I'm hoping to change my video card and maybe that will fix that problem, but I can't recommend to anybody to buy the Lego games on Steam. It's much smarter to go get them used for an Xbox 360 or a Wii or a Switch, even if they have support. Here we have a negative review. Full controller required, but doesn't really have full controller support. My off-brand Switch controller doesn't work with it. Steam controller config doesn't seem to help at all. So it basically means it has to have an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, which would be what I assume anytime it says controller support on Steam. So yeah, this one's a bit of a shame. It should have gotten more views, but it didn't have relevancy even when it came out in October of 2018. There was no cartoon, as far as I know, no big reason why Crayola would have any interest at all. I'm not sure how interesting Crayola actually is. I imagine nearly 100% of every child in the United States has used a Crayola crayon, has colored with a Crayola crayon, has seen the brand, and has zero love for Crayola, because there's kind of nothing to love about it. It's just crayons. It's just a tool. It's not special. It really doesn't even have much competition other than off-brand crayons. So maybe what they were thinking about doing was having a cartoon, and the cartoon failed to get developed. Then a game like this would make sense. Otherwise, I don't even know why you get the Crayola license, because you could make this game with Unity assets and do the similar thing and save yourself probably several $1,000s by not licensing it and just making a Splatoon clone. And if you want to talk about Splatoon clones on Steam, then I still kind of have to say that Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash is probably your best bet, and that is a anime lewd game with ninja anime girls shooting each other in bikinis with squirt guns, water guns. But yeah, oddly that game was made with a passion, so it's a more quality product. Next we have this game, Crazy Machines VR. Unfortunately, we can see it's mixed in its reviews, and it's a VR game. So even if I did want to keep this on the follow list, all I could do is keep it on the follow list, because I wouldn't put it on the wish list, because I'm still leaning very heavily to never buying a virtual reality headset. It might happen like 10-20 years from now. Maybe VR at that point will be so prevalent and so cheap, but right now VR seems like it's been a total failure for this generation, in the same way it's been a total failure for several previous generations. 47% positive of the reviews, $19.99. I don't think I need to go any further with this game. It's leaving the follow list. Next we have Creed Rise to Glory, which is a VR game. Overall, it has 80% positivity of 336 reviews, but it is only 60% positive in the last 30 days. So we'll want to see if something has changed. A boxing game in VR is probably in the top 3 styles of games I would want to play in VR. Having the Rocky characters licensed and showing their characters. This is Creed Rise to Glory is the son of Rocky Balboa, to continue the series, because Sylvester Stallone as a actor is just far too old to be playing the hero there. But it requires VR. It's $30, so it's asking a pretty high premium. It has its own third-party EULA, which is not something I generally care about. Let's see. There's launch issues on the Oculus for Oculus users on April 19th, and in January you got this free Legends update. So originally I don't think you had the skins for Mr. T and Rocky Balboa and some of the other old people you would box, which would have made it a less attractive game, quite frankly. I am a huge fan of Punch-Out, but I like Punch-Out because it's a timing strategy game, not a accurate boxing simulator. game. Playing this in VR would be, let's see, we have here saying it won't even respond to its own commands to start the game. I hope they fix multiplayer one day. Game does not work. So there's major launch issues. Mechanics are terrible. You swing your arms and the stamina is gone. You can only take 1 to 3 hits to slow down time. So there's probably some problems. There have been issues with this game since April 20th where you can't launch the game on Oculus. Don't buy the game if you have Oculus Rift until there's been an update. Honestly, very disappointed in the game. I was playing the game like box VR and was excited for something that was close to the real boxes, but the mechanics are so clunky and awkward it constantly broke the game. It literally crashed once. So yeah, it seems like there's some problems here, and this is the level of quality you probably would expect from a licensed game. This is why licensed games don't ever really succeed. I've never heard of this developer. For reference also, yeah, the Legends update definitely would change my feeling on this game. So what do I want to do? Do I want to give this game 6 more months to see if maybe they would fix it, which they probably won't because the movie Creed is already out and I don't see a reason why they would fix it. Also, it's in VR. I think the search is just going to have to continue. I think this is a game that should leave the default list. It's got too many problems, and it was positive when it first released, and now it's having problems. And even when it was positive, it's not a lot of people. This is a major VR game release. Come to look at it, and in 6 months it only got 336 reviews. So yeah, I think the search continues, and one day we will probably have a good boxing game that could be played ideally inside and outside of VR. But I don't think we're there. I would also say that these graphics look decent, but even for being 6 months old, they look not hyper realistic or really good. I think that a lot more polish could have been put on this. This is also probably a game that you could get used and play on the PlayStation VR and have a cheaper experience instead of paying $30 and a better experience. A lot of the PlayStation VR games in particular have been ported to Steam in very bad ways. Next we have a game called Crisscross. This is, I believe, a game using the new technology called Live 2D, which has figured out an algorithm where you generically draw a stationary, usually anime visual novel character, and it can figure out where the arms, legs, face are and add some movement, blinking, things like that to make the characters look less stationary and like they're actually moving around. And it's done algorithmically where there's just a little bit of swaying back and forth to look like just a normal person fidgeting, instead of somebody having to animate that by hand, frame by frame, or even using a rendering software that would have a keyframe and then another keyframe, and then having to render all the frames in between the keyframes, which often requires a lot of processing power. Live 2D is going to definitely be the new big improvement for a lot of visual novel games and games in general, where there's whether it's a mobile game or a PC game. Mobile games in particular will have less space taken up. As for what this is, they're saying it's a full animation CG. Is also movable, full world Japanese development. It's rated mixed at 51% positive as a visual novel. And it seems like you have just at least these two characters on the screen most of the time, and these are probably secondary characters. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be a romance here, or if there's supposed to be anything. It seems like it's kind of maybe a romance game, but Crisscross, it's $3.99, which is surprisingly cheap. It's also from Sakura Game, and Sakura Game tends to have some cheap quality. Full audio in Japanese and subtitles in English. 13 achievements. Let's see if we can get an idea of how long a game like this is, because that's what people really want to know, is how long is it, how many words are in it. The more words, the better. Let's see what the reviews say. Let's see. Let's see. Got the game from free. You might want to cross this off your list. So it's too long a review. A nice experience that filled only with one-sided love triangles and worsened by an awful translation. My perception grew significantly as I played. Originally, it was as low as a 2.5 out of 10. So it seems like it's a bad translation. And so people don't like the story, and that's the problem. Seems like it was an indie game. It only has about 4 hours of entertainment. Apparently there's a cross-dresser in the game, and people are upset that they were tricked into falling in love with a cross-dresser. Let's see if we can find the character. This one I think is actually a male. Commonly referred to as a trap, although maybe I'm using that phrase wrong, so don't yell at me if I'm using it wrong. Specifically, I think traps in particular are cross-dressers who are enjoying, engaging, and actively seeking to trick people into a relationship that they are not, they wouldn't want to be in. So yeah, just a bad story game. We don't need bad visual novels. If I am going to cover visual novels, I need to cover the best of the best. Same is true for Western visual novels, which is what Crystal Chameleon looks like. It came out on November 7th of 2018, and I kind of like the art style, but you can see there's not a lot of animation going on here in the background, and this is a video we're looking at, and it's just like flipping the characters back and forth, and it seems like there's a lot of text that the person is just skipping through to make the video. So it seems like the entirety of the game is looking at rather small text, and if you can't even make the text bigger to make your screenshots, that's a problem. It seems like you're dealing with a small collection of people too, not a lot of people here, and not a ton of background scenes. And then this thumbnail animation side, look at her and then come back and look at this, and that is very, very different animation style there. This is $3.99, which is suspiciously cheap. It only has one user review. It fails to have relevancy for that reason alone. It's English only, but not full audio, so again, you'd still be reading. My expectations for the game were low, but there's a lot of indie games that deserve a lot more attention. This is definitely not the case. Looks more like a game concept, not a game itself. So Crystal Chameleon, I'm sure this art in this thumbnail caught my attention, and that's why it made it to the follow list, but it's been given its 6 months chance, and it has failed to get anybody else to buy it or play it. and I think removing this from the fall list, it's exactly the right move. Next, we're getting away from visual novels, and so many games on the fall list were visual novels. That probably won't be the case a year from now when I do the next fall list cleanup, or 6 months from now when I do the wish list cleanup, because I think my standards have increased quite a bit with visual novels, and unless it is top tier, hundreds of people like the game and have reviewed the game, it's probably not going to even be considered. So this game is called Curious Cases, which is 78% in the last 30 days, 80% in its lifetime. It came out April 4th, 2019. The thing here is this, unfortunately, while it looks good, also looks like what might have been a asset flip horror game, because it's gotten so good and so easy to make an asset flip, a Unity asset flip or an Unreal asset flip horror game, that even good games now fall in that level of category. This is a desktop or VR 3-chapter escape the room, maybe mystery game, and seems like it's something I could play. And I don't know if it actually is an escape the room style game or if it's just a mystery game where you're in a small area. And so when you see the VR examples, it actually looks worse than what playing on the desktop would look like, because you wouldn't have to have a 3D representation of the player. This is $6.99, and it's bundled with the Experiment Escape Room, which I think also is on the fall list. I don't think I really need to go down here and try and look at anything here. You have the puzzles are not engaging or particularly difficult. I'm fine with that. As a VR game, you're paying a very good price at $6.99. If I can get it discounted to about half that to play it on the desktop, that would be even better. This is how I definitely would want to see the VR industry adapting games from now on, where you can play them with or without VR, and VR should really just be an accessory. It's like a turbocharger on a car, something that most people won't ever need or use, but people could use as bragging rights. So I think this actually does deserve to go to the fall list. This is something I can play. It's not asking a lot. It's got relevancy because people have reviewed it and they've reviewed it positively. Moving forward, I think we're probably very close to the end at this point. Siberian the Time Travel Warrior, which is a silly concept of a barbarian in a cyber world, I assume. Let's see, it's 66% positive of 23 reviews. It's a platforming game. I am really not a fan of new games designed to look like old games. If I want to play old games, I would just play those old games. So that's something that doesn't really appeal to me. Although you can make specific arguments that I would agree with, where if you were to make a new Sonic game that played better than Sonic 1, I might play that and expect that to look like the Sonic 1, even though it's a brand new game. Or if you were to make a new Super Mario Brothers game, I'd kind of expect it to look like Super Mario Brothers, and Nintendo didn't even do that. They made it very 3D when they made new Super Mario Brothers, but it still worked pretty well, in my opinion. Let's see. It's bundled with some other games that look terrible, which gives it a strike against it. Let's see the reviews. There's long reviews here. long reviews. I don't know why people do it. Can't even play the game. 10 out of 10 negative. Apparently it's super hard. I really don't have any interest in my life to play super hard games. There's a lot of games that people are saying it's good if they got the game for free. I really like to play this game to completion because it's gorgeous looking and fun, but I'm uncomfortable paying money for a game that uses sound effects blatantly stolen from other games, and I think you should be. Gunstar Heroes in particular, well, at least the devs have great taste. I'm returning it. So, claims of plagiarism in the development of the game, which has certainly happened before on Steam, but also sometimes it might not be that clear cut because the sound effects might have been properly licensed, or a very popular game may have licensed something from a music catalog, and then that catalog is still available to be licensed to other developers. Yeah, I don't think there's a reason to keep this on the follow list though. If you're looking for a hack and slash platformer game, you might run into this, but I bet you would probably run into several other styles of games that would have sold better and would interest people more than this. So let's go forward and see if this starts with D. Okay. Alright, so we have gone through the C's and we're on this horror game that looks like it's full motion video and tags sexual content and gore. So Damon, I guess I'll probably remove this one too from, well actually I'm gonna add this to the wish list because this game is not 88% positive. $4.99 right now, discounted by half. The reason why I'm moving on to the D's for this game is because I don't think it starts next episode particularly well to be paused on that style of game. Instead we'll start on Damsel. So that's going to be it for this recording. We went nearly 2 hours. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos because that helps me with YouTube and tells them that my videos are worth watching. When you subscribe to my channel, please click the notification bell. If you want a friend or follow me on any other social media sites as backup notifications, that it will be very helpful. Also, there's a bunch of links down below to different sites. And sure, let me know in the chat if there's some new site I should be on, because I'm not always in the loop with that kind of stuff. If you want to support me financially on a monthly basis, there's a link down below to Patreon, where you could donate as little as $1 a month, I believe. And if you want to do a one-time gift, you can simply friend me on Steam and gift me either a gift card or a game off my wish list. That's why we make the wish list very curated. It's why I'm going through the follow list, making sure the games that I think might deserve to be on the wish list actually do deserve to be on the wish list. Or you could just gift me a game that you want me to see, want to see me cover on Steam in general, even if it's not on the wish list. I'm perfectly fine with that. That's it for this recording. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.